Well, welcome to our latest podcast, In the World Needs More Poetry, and I am delighted today to say that our guest is Dame Mary Beard, who of course is a very well-known English classicist specialising in ancient Rome. She is former professor of classics at Cambridge University, and I'm just thrilled that she's here. Hello, Mary.
It's great to be here, Mark. Thank you very much.
And of course, the wonderful thing about you is that you're also from Shropshire.
Yeah, we've got something in common.
We've got to unite here.
Yes.
So normally I ask people to choose a poem which they then read at the beginning, at the end of our conversation. But today, a little bit more difficult because you've chosen a poem of 12,000 lines.
Yes.
You've chosen the Odyssey by Homer, and it is about 12,000 lines,
Yes.
is it not?
24 short books.
Yeah. And obviously originally classical Greek, so written in epic hexameter and in many translations, which we can come back to in a moment.
Yes.
But first of all, can we just talk about the question that often comes up about who wrote it? So, there wasn't a Mr. Homer, or was there?
This also could keep us going till tomorrow. The Homeric question, as it is called. Look, 99% certain it wasn't written by anybody called Homer.
Yeah.
It's not even certain that it was written by the same person who wrote the other long, early epic poem in Greek called the Iliad, also ascribed to Homer.
Mm-hmm.
The best guess, but I'm going to have to say this really is a guess, is that it started life in a fluid and flexible form in some kind of bardic culture. Probably, anything from the 10th century BCE onwards. We guess that because it has many of the features that bardic poetry, oral composition has, that it reuses adjectives and epithets in the same place to kind of, to get you going. When you're having to be kind of partly composing on the spot. So you've got these bards and they're telling the story. They're in Greek metre. It's all quite complicated. And so they're partly appealing to stock phrases and epithets, partly then giving it their own spin. And how long that process went on. It could have been 50 years, it could have been 150, 200. Certainly, if it started in the 10th or 9th century, it could not have been written down because at that point, there was no alphabetic writing in Greece. Alphabetic writing begins at the end of the 8th century BC. And the best guess is that somebody or some group, sort of soon after writing becomes established, took the kind of bardic ensemble and smartened it up a bit and turned it into much like the poem we have now, not divided into the books, that doesn't come until later, but gave it the shape it now has. That process probably wasn't one-off. We know that it was being edited probably in the 5th century BC. So it's got a probably 500-year process of composition. Who in that process Mr. Homer was is a mystery, and he probably doesn't exist, but
So it's true to say it emerges as a text and finalises at some point.
At some point. And there has been a huge amount of scholarly effort trying to work out what those points were, how you dated it, when it started, when it finally emerged, etc., etc. I don't think that any of it is conclusive. I think you have to kind of, a bit with Homer, you have to go with the flow. You have
Yeah.
to say, well, we don't quite know, and etc., etc. It was oral. It became written.
Yeah. And I mean, most people will know, at a guess, stories from the Odyssey, but of course it tends to make up a smallish percentage of the whole.
Yeah.
So without asking you to tell us the whole story, could you just briefly give us a sense of it?
I think I certainly came to the Odyssey with stories from the Odyssey, which I was told at junior school, my mum told me. So what people tend to know of the Odyssey is the story of how the hero Odysseus, on his way back from the Greek defeat of the mythical town of Troy, how he goes through these various kind of, not labours exactly, but struggles in order to get home. And it's those struggles that we learn. There's how Odysseus fought the one-eyed cannibal monster Cyclops and escaped from his cave, how he resisted the charms of the alluring sirens, etc. How he also spent 10 years, or pretty much 10 years, on the island of a seductive nymph Calypso.
I know, sort of sex slave.
As a sex slave, that is true. And then how he also had a bit of sex slavery with Circe. All the while, he's trying to get back to his home and his wife, Penelope. Now, all those things are in the Odyssey. That is true. But I think what people find when they know that and then they pick up the text and they go, I'm going to read this, it doesn't kind of feel like that instantly, because what you have, and I think it is quite extraordinary, because this is one of the two earliest works of Western literature. Whenever it was composed, it's certainly that. Right? You sort of expect, when you think early work, you think this is going to be kind of quite straightforward. It's going to start at A and it's going to move through to Z, and it's not going to be sophisticated, because early work, you think, it's a bit primitive. What is amazing is that you have all these stories, kind of stories within stories, and kind of two strands, because one of the themes is how Odysseus gets home. The other theme, main theme, is not about Odysseus at all, in fact. It's about what is happening in his palace at Ithaca while he is trying to get home. And there is two things going on. One is that his wife Penelope is being harassed by a load of thugs who are always translated as suitors in the translation. I think they do want to marry her, that's for sure. But they're a load of thugs. And you never, when does anybody use the word suitor, right? I think it's a suitor, right? So there's a load of guys in the palace saying, look, Penelope, Odysseus has gone. He was 10 years at Troy, and now he's going 10 years on his way home. You've got to give up on him, right? And marry one of us. Penelope's trying to put this off because she is, she's got a good scheme. She says, yes, I will marry you when I have finished weaving the shroud for my father-in-law. But every night she has Penelope's little trick. She weaves during the day and she unpicks it every night, so she never finishes. So she says, can't possibly marry you or even choose who to marry till I finish the shroud, but she's never going to. More important, really, in the plot, though that's, I think, the other bit of the Odyssey that people know, is what is happening to the son, who was just a baby, really, when Odysseus left. And the Odyssey is as much a poem about how Telemachus, which is the guy's name, how he grows up and becomes a man, as it is about how Odysseus gets back home. So it's about, it is about a homecoming, but it's also about kind of a maturation poem. And the first word of the poem is andra in Greek, man, right? And that man is, I think technically, as the verse goes, it is Odysseus, right? It is tell me the story of a man, right? Who was a wily man or whatever. But also it's alerting us to the idea there's another man in this poem, and that's the son, who is becoming a man as his father eventually does come back home. And the very first book of the poem, we have a little mention of Odysseus being off with Calypso at this point. But what happens is we see the start of Telemachus's voyage to become a man, because Athena comes, goddess Athena, and in disguise, this is why these things are a bit complicated. She comes in disguise as a man called Mentes, and she says, "Look, you've got to grow up, mate. You've got to grow up." And at the end of this first book, we find the beginning of Telemachus growing up, because he goes to the suitors and he says, "You guys, this is disgraceful. You are a load of thugs, and I don't really want you in my dad's palace anymore." And so there's two strands.
Yes.
And not only are there two strands, but all those famous stories that we have, the Cyclops and whatever, they are stories within stories. Then those are told to us readers when Odysseus fetches up at one of the places that he's trying to go through on his way back home. And they entertain him, and he says, "I'll tell you what I've been doing." So we've got a story within a story, which is told to us as Odysseus tells it to his hosts. And then we've got Odysseus's voyage, and we've got Telemachus growing up. So it is so complicated.
It's a complex sophistication, isn't it?
Yes.
And my favourite bit is the Calypso story. I think it's a great story,
yes.
Of course, but it has a complexity to it and a nuance to it, which, it's just good storytelling, and you get caught in, don't you?
But I think I might sort of advert alert here. I've also started a podcast called Instant Classics. There's my advert. One of the things we're doing is as a kind of in a kind of parallel book club, is we are taking people through the Odyssey, kind of week by week over the next year or so, I expect. But what made us do that is because if somebody says to you, what work of classical literature should I haven't really read any, what should I read? And the answer is, almost always is the Odyssey. And it is wonderful. Once you get into it, it is mind-blowing. But I was looking at it just a few months ago, and I thought, you pick up book one, and it's just so not what you expect. Odysseus isn't there. You think this is the story of Odysseus, but he isn't there. And all kinds of things happen. And Athena kind of is disguising herself as a friend of, whatever. And you think, once you get in, it's fine, but it's quite hard to get into.
Yeah.
And so we thought it'd be quite fun to say, look, okay, come along with us. We'll help you read it. Because classicists can take some of the oddities of classical literature very much for granted.
Like theologians in their own
I'm
field.
sure. But when you see it, suddenly you think, let me just look at this as if I'd not seen anything like it before. And you don't need much help.
No.
But you do need a bit of a helping hand.
And if one of our listeners today was, inspired by this, which no doubt they will be, lots of translations around. I mean, famously the old sort of Alexander Pope, but then you've got Emily Wilson. It's one I really treasure. But recently you've got Stephen Fry, you've got Stephen Mitchell. Do you push people in one direction?
I'm partly a let many flowers bloom kind of person.
Yeah.
And say, if you find a translation you like it, stick with it. You might have all kinds of, people might have all kinds of quibbles with it, but nobody sits down to translate the Odyssey who's hopeless.
No.
It's just, no. So if the translation speaks to you, go with it, and I don't mind. I think that the one where using in our podcast is Emily Wilson's. It's very good. Came out a few years ago. I think it spoke to people because it didn't use the usual euphemisms.
Yes, that's right.
Right?
Yeah.
No, so she calls a slave a slave. You go to most of the translations that are available right up to the 50s, and they're always serving girls.
Yeah.
Technically that's sort of true, but actually this is slavery. And I think that was very refreshing. But then there's a very recent one just came out earlier this year by Daniel Mendelsohn, which is also very good. I think that if I were to say which would I want to use myself, I think it's, to be honest, I still go back to my old Penguin E.V. Rieu of, because that's what I've always had. But if I were to say which I think is the best, I'd go for Wilson or Mendelsohn. And because if you say every translation is a kind of conversation between them, it's a bit of a cliche, but it's a conversation between the text and a modern readership, then they've got a refreshingly modern angle. And it is tricky. I mean, it's in some ways Homer is quite easy Greek. It's not like reading some terribly difficult bit of Thucydides. It is quite easy, but the individual words do make you think, well, what does that actually mean? And there's one in the first line, the first couple of lines, where the poet is saying, "Tell me news about this man," just kicking off. And there's an adjective used with andra, man, which is polytropos. And if you had to say, what does polytropos mean? I mean, we can see what it is literally. It means a very turny man. Tropos means turning around, and poly
and it becomes cunning, does it?
And some people think it's cunning. Some people think it's kind of astute and smart.
Yeah.
It's really Wilson's is complicated.
Yes, he was a complicated
man. Mendelssohn tries to kind of say he's a roundabout man, and the trouble about that is it does sound like a roundabout. He's American, but there's also in that word polytropos is something about his inside, his interiority. But there's also the fact that he's going roundabout everywhere in order to get home. He is literally travelling roundabout. So you've got this word which is partly about what sort of guy he is, complicated, wily, bit tricky. Would you trust a polytropon man? I'm not sure. But also, he's a travelling man.
Yeah. And this, I mean, even his name, Odysseus, the root of that.
It's about hating.
Hating, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's really, really difficult to place yourself in relation to Odysseus because he has got this nasty name, which means hater. But also, he comes back home, but he's lost all his men. Now, the poet at one point, whoever they were, sort of tries, near the beginning, tries to say that they were foolish, the men were foolish. But our leader, the man who is bringing us back from Troy, where we have been successful, is it a good leader who has all his men die?
I was going to ask in what sense he's a hero, because so his men all disappear.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert, there's quite a lot of death towards the end.
Not nice.
Not nice. There's a hell of a lot of blood swashing about, and unless you're a swineherd or an old nurse, you've got something coming your way. And then he's ready to leave again.
He's going to get. He's had a prophecy that he's going to go away again to where people won't recognise what a winnowing fan is, or an oar. They'll think an oar. They'll think an oar is a winnowing fan. So it'll be somewhere really internal, away from the sea,
to a place where nobody knows what an oar is.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
And you think, so this whole poem was about him coming home, but he's not going to stay.
Yeah.
So we've had all of this, and we've got the bed ready, and he's terribly keen to get back to Penelope, and they're back in the marital bed, and he's about to go off again. And you think, this is just so mind-bogglingly complicated. And it is saying, well, what is a hero? What is what does it take to be a good man?
Yeah. Which leads me, I don't want to keep you, you're a very busy person. I just wanted to ask about a feminist reading of this book, because I do actually think you could argue that, particularly Penelope is quite powerful in some way. And people like Margaret Atwood, of course.
Penelope had brilliant. I think it's one of her best, and it doesn't get the attention that it deserves.
It's a great little novella, isn't it, really?
Because, spoiler alert, there's something very nasty is going to happen to those that we should not call serving girls.
Yeah.
And she's one of the very first, if not the first, of modern fictional recreations, which tries to say, let's see it through their eyes, let's see it through the woman's eyes. And actually the poem lets you do that.
Yes, because you could get stuck on the Telemachus putting, his mum in her place. You can't, we talk about words, you don't. But actually it seems to me to be another story to be told here, and I think Atwood focuses on that.
She does, and I think it's what's great recently is there have been so many attempts to come back in and mess around a bit, but constructively mess around a bit.
Yeah.
You mentioned Penelope being put in her place, and I think there is a passage in the first book when we've got the thugs and Penelope has come downstairs because the thugs are having a party, and they've got the bard singing, and the bard is singing about what a terrible time the Greek heroes are having trying to get home from Troy. And Penelope, not unreasonably, comes down and says, please, could we have something a bit more cheerful, right? This is terribly, can we put a new record on? And at that point, as you say, Mark, Telemachus says, shut up. Says, words a man's business. Go back up to your room. And you have that moment, like one said, it's the first time a teenage boy in Western literature has shut his mum up, right? Yeah. And many, many follow. But that's not the end of it, because Penelope actually is as wily, as polytropos, as her husband Odysseus is. And she's not the person who is solely silenced. And sometimes the thugs get cross with her, because at the beginning of book 2, they start to say, we're still in the debate about thuggery, you've been sending us little notes. And you've been teasing us. You've been playing with us. And there is a later ancient strand, before you get to modern reworkings of Penelope, there is a later ancient strand where they think that she's a bit of a tease. Not entirely admirable. She's, the suitors, the thugs, might be awful, but Penelope has been leading them on.
And finally, the goddess Athena, who seems to have a thing for Odysseus.
Yes.
And you wonder how far he would have got unless she'd sort of,
yeah.
it's almost as if she's got a thing for him in a way, isn't
Yes,
it?
yes.
And she comes in at the end and sort of makes things.
Yes.
Any thoughts about her in this?
I think one of the things that's most difficult for a modern reader, whether they're a scholarly modern reader or somebody picking it up for the first time, is how you deal with the gods.
Yeah.
And Athena is in this poem, is the god who has the biggest role. And she is actually, it seems, making things turn out okay for Odysseus and for Telemachus. And yet you don't understand divine motivation. What makes the gods do what they do? And I think people can find it quite irritating how she's always kind of taking the shape of somebody else. That she's, in the first two books, she appears as Mentes, then she appears as somebody with a very similar name called Mentor, who's as in the origin of our mentor, and then she appears as Telemachus. Right? So you think, I can't get my head around this. I mean, what is Telemachus doing while Athena is appearing as him? And I think it is quite rebarbative. I think it's quite hard to make sense of it. But there is nevertheless, I think, a sense that there are big questions of Greek religion here, actually. Like, what do gods do? What do gods look like? How do you recognise one?
Yeah.
How would you know if you were talking to one? Because when Athena is being one of Telemachus' friends, quite often afterwards, and Telemachus recognised that he'd been talking to the divine. But how do you do that? And
yes, and then you get heroes who start to get talked about as if they're godlike, and gods who start behaving like humans.
That's right. And and one of the adjectives used for Odysseus and others is God is Dios, and we put godlike, but it's really more than just godlike. I think often we don't give ancient either Greek or Roman writers enough credit for actually raising quite complicated issues. It's not that they weren't taking all this for granted. They wonder what is it to be or to look like or to be halfway towards being a god. And there are marvellous stories you get in other bits of Greek literature, which are they kind of play on the same concerns. Some perfectly nice young lad comes to the river and there's an old lady sitting on the bank and he says, well, madam, do you need a lift? Right? Across the river. He says, oh, yes, please, young man. I can't get to the other side. So he said, well, let me carry you across the river. Picks her up. And it turns out that she's very light. And then as he's halfway across the river, he realises she smells amazing. And he then realises that she's a god. And actually how gods weigh, how they smell, how they shine, all those are quite a part of quite a complicated debate about what gods are.
And fascinating, of course, how later they get incorporated in various forms in the Christian tradition. So, the story of St. Christopher.
Yes.
Well,
exactly.
Very similar sort of.
Exactly.
So if you've been listening to this podcast and you're thinking, oh, I'm quite intrigued now, could you just tip them over the edge and say why you would really advise that people go out and buy their copy and read it?
I think it helps to make sense of the rest of Western literature. Somehow here we see the building blocks already in a hugely sophisticated way of things that are going to become the road movie, the Western, the Bildungsroman. That this is where everybody has gone back to change, adapt, alter, put two fingers up to, but it's never, ever gone away. It's omnipresent in Western literature. And it just makes such a difference to, whether it's a film like the Coen brothers' Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? Which again, or, you know, we're looking forward, or I'm looking forward next year to the Christopher Nolan
Yes.
movie of the Odyssey. So there could not be a better time
to read it,
to get in up close and personal to the Odyssey, and we could put it in the bestsellers.
And as you've brought out, I mean, part of its beguiling beauty is the questions it leaves you with rather than the answers it provides. And that's always a good sign of a book, it seems to me.
I think that's, you know, and people get cross with you when you say that. They say, oh, people always say it's always the questions. Well, where are the answers? Yeah. Actually, the answers are for you to work out, Sonny, right?
Yeah.
What this is doing. And it's asking questions about what is it to be civilized? When we have Odysseus and the one-eyed Cyclops, colonial writers have seen that as Odysseus basically invading the Cyclops territory.
Yeah.
Now, the Cyclops also happens to be a cannibal.
Yes.
Which is, you know, a bit of an awkwardness. But this is, do we really think, who do we think is in the right here? You know, and they in the end skewer his eye out.
Yeah.
Is that heroism?
Answers, please, on a postcard. Well, you've just reminded me why I did ancient history A level and loved it to bits. And you know, as you get older and you get a little bit further away from those days, it's good to be reminded of your first loves, I think. So, thank you so much for coming here today. And the people of Southwark Cathedral are really grateful for you being here. And
it's a wonderful place. And
thank you. And for all that you're doing to help people into the ancient world, which is you, as you say, is in so many ways still with us.
Yeah. And it's fun. You know, you don't have to admire it, but you can enjoy it.
Yeah. Well, thank you for helping us enjoy it.
Thank
Mary
you.
Beard, thank you very much.
Thank you.